Hello, my name is Alex, and welcome to Eclectic Eccentrics, a series in which we will be looking at some marvellous and some not so marvellous individuals who have been described as eccentric somewhere along the way. Their stories might delight, terrify, or intrigue you, but they will always entertain. Well, here we are again, despite various trials and tribulations, which, granted there weren't really any, I am back with Series 3 of Eclectic Eccentrics. That's right folks, my loyal band of followers. I have 5 brand new eccentrics to bring you over the forthcoming weeks, with a special episode 6 to wrap everything up, as always. What a treat. And I am of course delighted that you have joined me. Whether you're a new listener, a veteran, or even if you just got lost and ended up stumbling across this podcast by accident, a jolly warm welcome to you all. Now, on with business. Our first eccentric of the series is from the homeland of eccentrics, England, and his name is SIMEON ELLERTON. Now, I must admit that I get particularly excited when I come across an eccentric during my research for these episodes that wasn't born with a silver spoon shoved up their derriere. I do think, certainly historically, that eccentricity is wrongly reserved for the rich and wealthy, with those in lower classes being confined to the label of just crazy. As we all know, history is written mainly by and about the wealthy, and wealthy men at that, which is a huge shame, as I fear we really have missed out on learning about some good old common folk, especially those who were brilliant eccentrics in their own way. I am therefore delighted to be telling you a little bit about a man who wasn't born wealthy or with a title, but just went about living life on his own terms. SIMEON ELLERTON was born in either 1695 or in 1702, depending on which publication you read, on the 23rd of August, and was shortly after baptised at St. Peter's Church in Leeds. Unfortunately, there is not much information about his early life. He appears to have come from a modest background and was the son of a Mr. John Ellerton. In 1725 he also married, it appears, a woman named Isabel Darrett, though records are not entirely certain about this either. SIMEON is remembered today, however, for his love of exercise, namely walking, which he did an awful lot of. During the time that SIMEON lived, long-distance travel was usually done by horse and carriage. The roads, as you can imagine, were particularly poor, nothing really than muddy tracks, so it was not the easiest thing to get your letters, parcels and packages delivered. SIMEON, however, appears to have had an enterprising mind, and started to hire himself out as a foot courier, and was more than happy to carry all sorts of loads. Not only that, but he would walk extraordinary distances to deliver these packages. He was known, for example, to have travelled down to London to make a delivery, some 256 miles away from his home in Craik. The thing was, however, that during the time that his courier business was operating, SIMEON developed a fancy for a new house. The problem was, however, that he did not have a lot of money. Certainly not enough to buy one. So, what did he do? Well, he built it. Stone by stone. You see, when SIMEON was out and about on his rambles delivering packages, he would inspect any stones that he came by and, if he deemed them a suitable building material, he would carry them home with him. I should also add at this point that he carried these rocks around on his head. Eventually, after walking God knows how many miles, SIMEON had collected enough stones to build an entire cottage, saving him, as you can imagine, a lot of money. Realistically, he was able to build himself a better cottage than he could ever have hoped to have purchased otherwise. Amazingly, the cottage he built is still standing to this very day, which is real testament to his building skills. It is recorded that SIMEON became so accustomed to carrying a weight that, even after his house was built, he would continue to place a bag of stones on his head whenever he went out for a ramble. SIMEON continued to live in his cottage until his death at the ripe old age of 104, depending on which year you think he was born. 104 sounds more impressive, so we'll stick with that. Now, SIMEON appears to have been a bit of an inspiration, as even in more modern times, others seem to have been encouraged by SIMEON to build their own castles. Quite literally. Okay, perhaps they weren't really inspired by SIMEON, not that there's any evidence anyway, but it sounded good. But yes, anyway, castles. Let's talk about a chap called Jim Bishop. Jim Bishop was born in Honolulu in 1944 to a working-class family. Partway through his childhood, during a bike ride through San Isabel National Forest, Bishop came across a piece of land for sale. He loved this plot of land so much that he convinced his parents to buy it for him, using pocket money he had saved up. It must have been one hell of a paper round. For the next 10 years, Bishop and his father would camp out in the woods until Bishop was ready to start building. Let us therefore fast forward to 1969. Bishop, who was by this time a newlywed to his wife Phoebe, decided to build a modest stone cottage for his family with help from his father. This project included building a water tower, which Bishop covered with rocks before he then surrounded it with a rock wall and an arched window. It was noted by friends and neighbours that the water tower resembled a turret. It was a story that I came across while researching this episode that there was also a couple who even rejoiced when they stumbled across Bishop's building work, stating they'd found the castle they'd heard so much about. From this, an idea was born. Bishop built himself a castle. And build he did, for he continued building up the castle until 2019, where he only stopped because of a decline in his health. The castle boasts not only a moat and a grand ballroom, but also consists of 3 turrets, the tallest of which is over 160 feet tall. The 3 towers are connected by metal bridges, which have been described as sketchy by some of the visitors. It is very much an enter-at-your-own-risk sort of place, I gather. No red tape to be seen here. These towers are arguably not the most impressive aspect either, as not only is there the castle, but also a dragon, because what would a medieval-style castle be without a dragon? As I understand it, this dragon does breathe fire, which is also very impressive, and only to be expected, of course. Although Bishop has now passed away, the castle still stands today and can still be visited. Bishop never charged an entry fee when he opened his castle up to the public, only asking people to donate anything they could, and this was mainly so he could keep building. This decision was also because Bishop didn't want to create a tourist trap and wanted everyone and anyone to be able to enjoy his remarkable creation. He would also quite happily give tours for free as well. This said, a website called Roadside America once remarked that visitors should note that Bishop was a tough-talking man with strong extreme beliefs, and sometimes he expresses them bluntly and loudly. If you and your children want to avoid potentially offensive rants involving politics, you may want to steer clear. I apologise for my terrible accent. These days, the castle is looked after by Bishop's son Daniel, and is still described as a work in progress. I would recommend, at the very least, that you go and look at some photos of the castle online, given its very, very impressive nature. Now, I don't know about you, but all this talk of hard work has made me a little bit thirsty, which, if anything, just demonstrates that I am certainly not built for manual labour. But, even more devastatingly, it also means it's the end of the episode. But who knows? Maybe, listener, after listening to this, you now find yourself inspired and will begin collecting stones to build your own house with, or castle. Anyway, thank you for tuning in, and I'll be back with a brand new Eccentric next time. If you can spare a moment, please do consider giving me a review. Apparently it's good to ask for such things. I do imagine that this will be the last time I ask for this during this series, as you undoubtedly would find it ever so tiresome. I know that I do. So, I will say cheerio for now.